All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel with Things We Wear, and today we're going to talk about grading. So, I'm going to do kind of a brief overview of grading and just talk about the principles of it and talk about how it works in the fashion industry. And if you have more specific questions, please leave them for me below, and I would be happy to do follow up videos. So today I'm going to use Tucatec for my grading design or for my grading demonstration. And that's just because Tucatec has been the program that I use these days. And I will show you why. Here it is. So here is the Tucatec website. And as you can see, here is the package pricing. So actually, if you're a student and you're interested in trying Tucatec out, and I would be happy to do more tutorials on Tucatec, it's only $19 a month. Great, amazing deal. And then professional edition, $99. So if you're a freelancer, this is like a really great way to get started. So it is just like nice and easy, and yeah, much more friendly to the wallet than cashing out tons of money up front. Although I do really miss Acumark. I will have to say, I think Acumark's my favorite program, and Tucatec is like my next favorite program. But I think they both have their advantages and disadvantages depending on what you are trying to do. So anyway, so this is Tucatec, and it is a digital pattern making program. Like I said, there are a few. The major ones, basically Acumark, Gerber. Hear people call it Gerber Pattern Design or Acumark. And then there's Optitex, and there's Tucatec, which is this program, and Electra is another one out there. Although I don't know as many people who've used Electra, and I think there's a few others that I'm not super familiar with, but all in time. All right, so what is grading? Grading is basically the act of taking a pattern piece. So let's say this is my front pattern piece. I'll just give it a neckline so you can see it. Yes. And here, yes. I'm just going to make that a nice circle. Okay. And there's my neckline. So let's say this is my front piece. The act of grading and the way that pattern making works in the fashion industry is that when a style is developed, you develop it on one base size. Usually that base size is a size small, or medium. Often it's somewhere in the middle of the size range. Traditionally, it's usually like a smaller medium or a size 6 or an 8, depending on the brand. Some brands fit on smaller body types. It's also about the brand aesthetic and what they're going for. So a brand who is aimed at young teenagers might fit, let's say like Limited 2 or Hollister or something. They might fit on smaller bodies as their base size, and then kind of adjust from there. So it really depends on your customer, and often the base size is going to be some amount of. It can be realistic. It can be like, hey, this is really the type of person that often buys our clothes. But it can also be something that they're trying to attain for. Like, this is the image that we project of the person who buys our clothes. They're 5'7" and they have really long legs and a short torso, and they a 27-inch waist. It can be a little bit fantastical, and even in more practical companies, it can still be a bit fantastical, because finding a human being who is the same size on top and bottom, that has that exact measurement, is actually surprisingly really difficult. Very few people are consistently a size 4 or 6 or 2, and so that's why fit models often are in high demand and make pretty good money, and it can be expensive and difficult to find someone to make your fit model. So all that being said, there's a fit model, they're somewhere in the middle, and the style is fit and developed on that fit model. And then once the style is sort of ready, maybe it's getting closer to production, or it is style approved, so they're not going to make any more changes to the base pattern and the styling, then it would go into grading. And so that's when you would take this base pattern that's a size, we'll call it a size small, and you're going to add the sizing to it. And grading is pretty simple. It's basically taking these points along the corners and adjusting them in the X, or sorry, the X goes that way, the X or Y axis so that the garment will grow on each size or shrink on each size. And traditionally, the way this worked before there were digital pattern making systems is the pattern would be a paper pattern that was sent to a grader. And the grader would actually create all these rules, and it would be like rule number one equals, let's say often rule number one will be about length. So rule number one is that as we go up in size, the X goes minus a half inch each size, and it goes up a half inch each size. And that's rule number one. And then rule number two is the same, but you also get some y-axis definition here as it goes up in size or down in size. And so those grade rules, they would put that into the system with this paper pattern, and the grade rules would, I maybe said it wrong. Grade rules can work either way. It can happen with a paper pattern or with a digital pattern, but the grade rules are because of old CAD systems and the way you had to define those properties in a CAD system. So you had to preemptively know how the point was going to be moving, and then you had to apply that movement, that number. So if you're asking about grade rules, which I know I had a question about grade rules, it's to me a kind of antiquated way of grading. It's because of how systems used to be set up before our systems became more sophisticated. And in my mind, the only reason that grade rules still exist is really just because a whole generation of graders learned to grade that way. And they think of patterns in that way, that they're like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. They know all of their grade rules and they have it memorized. Grade rules are really specific to either a company or that specific grader. They might keep a notebook full of all those grade rules or an Excel file because they have to know what each number represents, right? So it can be, I think grade rules are difficult because they're not always easy to have transparency into. And it's just like a little extra complication. I also feel like it's kind of a remnant of a time when we had pattern makers and graders who had separate roles. And I would say now we're moving into this era where those traditional roles have kind of disintegrated a bit because there isn't as strong of a community of people making clothes in New York City, where a lot of these roles maybe were originated. You're seeing more pattern makers who are also graders, whereas in the past it was like you're a pattern maker and then there are graders, and those people were different and they had different roles and they worked on the pattern in different time periods. But yeah, now we're seeing more people who can do both, and part of that is because of the way the program is set up. If you're a pattern maker who can also do grading, you can actually go really far with that and do more with your pattern. And I would also argue it makes sense for a pattern maker to be a grader, because when you're a pattern maker, okay, you're thinking about the size 6, but you are also thinking about every size. And if you're, a good pattern maker or technical designer, you should be thinking about the size 12 and the size 2. And, if there's a extended sizing on this garment, how is it going to happen? You really do have to think pretty detailed about how exactly the armhole is growing or shrinking, how exactly the neckline is, how much length is going in either direction. To me, those fields really can be adjustable within the style. If you have a crop top, you maybe don't want it to grow as much in length as you go up in sizes. I think there are traditional grading techniques that are now being challenged a bit by people who are on either end of the spectrum of sizing and are saying, hey, nothing fits me. This needs to change. And that's why I think this is like a great time for pattern makers to learn to be graders, a great time for tech designers to learn to be pattern makers and graders, because you can bring so much knowledge to your styles and make them so much better if you have a strong understanding of grading. Okay, so that was my little intro. That's what grade rules are. So or grade rule point numbers system. I do not use those because I just think it's a lot to keep track of, and it's like one extra thing. The one good thing you could have is, like, let's say I have a front and it's already graded, and I had another front. It's easy for me to to plunk in like copy paste the grade rules. But I will also say you can still do that with this program. It's as simple as clicking this point, Control C, and then clicking here and Control V, and you would get whatever grading you had here applied there. So let's practice doing this here. There's a lot of grade rules that are pretty standard in the industry. Like for instance, length would often grade, let's say, a 1/2 inch. Before I can do any grading here, I'm going to go into sizes. I'm going to add in my sizes. So we discussed that this would be a size small. And right now I'm talking about alpha sizing, so there's also numeric sizing, and numeric sizing is when you have 0, 2, 4, 8, etc. Alpha sizing, often alpha sizing encompasses about 2 numeric sizes. So a small might be a 4, 6, and an extra small might be a 0, 2, if that makes sense. And in every brand that might be different. That's what's so fun about sizing, is it is so subjective. I know that there's people who would love to have more standards around it. In my mind, I feel like it's such a difficult area that it's nice to see innovation from brands, and sometimes you do see innovation from brands who do different things with their sizing. And so I kind of like the idea that it can be different at different brands. And I'm a very brand loyal person. Once I find a brand who does things in a way that I like, I just shop that brand. So, and I think a lot of people are that way too. I find it helpful too if you like to shop secondhand or vintage. If you know a brand, then it's really easy for you to find that brand online and buy it, and you don't have to try it on, and you know what kind of quality you're gonna get. So it's good to find that brand. Okay, so here now I have my sizes. You can see this is my little grading chart, and if you're in Tucatec and you want to follow along, it is View Grading Table. So View Grading Table pops up that little window over here, and I'm gonna just input measurements here. So here's my small. So as I go down in sizes, it's actually gonna go up in the x-axis. So let's say I wanted to grade a 1/2 inch. Some people grade, I think, I would say it's probably traditional to grade a 1/2 inch. And notice I had to switch directions. Now I'm going in the negative as I go up in sizes. Okay, so now you can see all my sizes. You can see the white one is the smallest and the pink is the largest. So that makes sense. The white one is the shorter one, pink is larger. And I'm going to grab this point. I'm literally just pressing Control C and then Control V. And now that point is graded as well. Woo! So yeah, I think a 1/2 inch is usually pretty standard. One thing I would say, and the reason you're growing, I think it's important to understand why you're growing in length. And that's because let's say this is a woman. So on women, in the front especially, we have a curve here. And so that curve is adding extra length. So that's primarily why this woman needs extra length in the front specifically. On men, and as we go up in sizes, as someone becomes wider, they also have more of a curve. Is it a 1/2 inch worth of curve? I'm not sure. I think this is where grading is a little bit tricky, because it's also making a little bit of an assumption that as people go up in sizes, they're getting taller, and as people go down in sizes, they're getting shorter. And that's definitely not always the case. And that's why I think you often find people who might be a size large, but everything looks long on them. And it's because I think a lot of times size larges are just made, like, we make them wider and longer. And maybe that's not always what people need. I think this is why I'm a strong proponent for having petite sizing and tall sizing. And then for regular sizing, maybe you don't need to grade within each of those sizes. Maybe this could grade 3/8 or 1/4. I haven't done research. I mean, this is, you'd want to test that out, but just a thought. Okay, so for this point, I'm going to go in the Y direction on the smaller sizes. I'm going to go, traditionally, alpha sizing is a 2-inch total grade, which would be 1 inch on the half and a 1/4 inch. This is just a quarter panel right here. So it'd be 1, 2, and then there'd be a back, 3, 4. So a quarter of 2 inches is a 1/2 inch. So that means minus 0.5, minus 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Cool, cool, cool. I didn't add an armhole in this yet. Maybe I should do that. All right, here's my add point. And I'm going to press the Alt button, which will allow me to specify some attributes. So I'm going to make it a grading point. Yep, cool. So now I can grade the armhole point. Traditionally, armholes often grade about a 1/4 inch in either direction. I don't know if this is always necessary. It probably depends on the person wearing the garment. But let's stick with that for now. I think a 1/4 inch is probably a good place to start. So it's going to go up in the x-axis a 1/4 and down and then also this is going to grade the same amount as the rest of the body. So it's going to get minus 0.5, minus 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. All right, sorry, I took a break there to get some tea. It's actually in the microwave, so I'll get it in a second. Desperately needing tea. All right, so we graded our armhole, and then here's the shoulder. So first off, I would say this is a bizarre shoulder because it has no shoulder slope. So I'm just going to move this point a little bit down here. There we go. And actually, like, why is it so... Maybe this is a box top. Maybe I'll bring this in just a little bit. And I'm just going to add some subtle curve shape there. And you can see this is a non-point curve, or it should be a non-curve line or point. There we go. So now, it's not, don't judge this pattern. This is just a little sample guy. It's obviously very funky. Just trying to make something that looks like anything. All right, that's a good start. Save. Okay, so now across shoulder. Across shoulder grade is a little hot button too, to me. I think that across shoulders grade too much on larger sizes. I don't think that women or men, sorry, I was thinking about this top in women's format, but just bodies. I don't think that you really need the shoulder to get so wide, and it ends up looking sloppy and like it doesn't fit. So traditionally the grade would be like a 1/4 inch and then 3/4 of an inch. So it'd look something like this. So in x-axis, it would go, it'd be 0 in the x. It'd be y, 0.25. There is my t. I'm going to go get that in just a second, 0.25. And then a lot of people would do it'd be 3/8, but it'd be 3/4 total. Grade here, I strongly disagree with this. I'm gonna, instead, I'll just keep it a 1/4 inch. But I will say one thing I've pondered on is, could it even be a 1/4 inch total? Could this grade be an 1/8 inch on the larger sizes? Because the thing that happens, something weird is happening here. Oh, yeah, there it is. So the reason that I want to discuss across shoulder grading compared to bust or chest grading, and the reason I think it's a hot button issue, is that someone who has a bust will need more room as they go up in sizes. Often people who have busts have larger busts and larger sizes. That's part of the reason a lot of people have to buy, let's say, an extra large because they're busty, but maybe their cross shoulder isn't as big. And so I think that's another reason why I'm a proponent for reviewing a cross shoulder grade. And honestly, I think the only answer to that is fitting it on a person. Like, find some people who are an extra large and see what works on them. Of course, not everyone's going to be the same. And the point is not to make something for any one body unless you are a brand who is specifically catering towards, let's say, curvy people or something like that. But the point is to to get an evaluation, like, does this look good on most people? Is this solving most people's problems? I think, of course, you're never going to have a perfect answer, but you can get closer to it, which is great. um, so here is neck width, and neck width usually grades about a 1/4 inch in the width, and then the front neck drop and back neck drop also grades. So in the y-axis, it's going to go minus an 1/8 inch because we're on the half here, and then 0.125, 0.125. So some of these grade rules are kind of something that at this point I've memorized after years of working. If you're new to grading, I think the first thing I would say, and one thing that I keep in handy, is ASTM. So ASTM, they release data on bodies that's updated is it yearly? I'm not sure how often, but it is updated, and they have petite and regular and plus and men's. I'm trying to think all the different categories they have. But it does give you a baseline of, how, like, for a size, whatever they call a standard size 8, how much is that growing per size, like from an 8 to a 10. So it gives you a baseline of those measurements and gets it in your head. Sometimes I would say there are times I disagree with ASTM, and I don't know all the people that they're surveying to get that data. But it is at times, I think, skewed towards people who are a little bit straighter and not as curvy. So I'm not always on the side of ASTM because I don't think that it captures what a lot of people really are, at least demographically in the United States these days. I don't think that many people have a straight, well, it really depends on demographic too, like on age specifically. I think younger people tend to be maybe a bit more curvy, or like very young people maybe tend to be a bit straighter. And then when we get into like 20s, 30s, maybe a little bit curvier. And then as we get older, a lot of people get, a lot of women get more straight body types. They kind of like, not everyone, but a lot of people have more filled in waistlines, and they lose some of their back end. So body shapes change as we get older. And I think when you're talking about your brand and what your grading should be, you should be including this in that idea, because unless you're making clothes for literally everyone, which not very many brands do that. Some really big brands do that. But most people have an idea of who they're catering clothing to and what demographic, like, is it 30s, 40s women in, London? Is it like, is it Midwestern women in the United States who are in their, 20s? Like, knowing that kind of data, of course, there are going to be people outside of that range who shop your store, but knowing that data will inform the shapes and the way that your grading should grade, to encompass most of your customer. Because the reality is that it's basically impossible to do something that fits everybody. I think if it fits everybody, then it also kind of fits nobody. So if you can drill down into the people that are into your brand and find out why, then you can adjust your grading to cater to their body shapes and the way that they they present as a size extra extra small or extra extra large. Like, who are those people? Because that's very different from brand to brand. So all that being said, if you're interested in grading, but definitely check out ASTM. It's a great place to start, and you can start looking at the way bodies grow and shrink, and and some various measuring points. It's confusing because the way they word things is not the way we would talk about things in apparel. And I'll need to look this up. If I'm allowed to share it on YouTube, then I will, and I can do a video where we talk about ASTM and like what is good about it and what I disagree with. But anyway, I hope this was kind of helpful. This was just a top, and I didn't even mirror it. Let me just complete this here. Oops. Uh-oh. Here I'm gonna view, show high grading. There we go. And here's now my grade line, or my mirror line is there. And this is just, I'm gonna save this as my front cut one self. There we go. All right, so that's it. Yeah, let me know if this was helpful or not at all helpful, and maybe what I can specifically talk about for the next round with, maybe we can do some pants. That could be interesting. Yeah, or maybe if any of you out there have a pattern or a style that they're interested in, I can specifically talk about those types of styles and the things to think about when you work on those. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.